With The Outsider, you came to Britain from South Africa, and then you became steeped in Shakespeare's canon. And most people, I think, today would still accept the greatest playwright who ever lived. But there is an issue, I think, about whether Shakespeare really appeals to young people and how you make Shakespeare appeal to young people. Some say the idea that schools expect kids at the age of 11 or 13 to learn two Shakespeare texts is a huge mistake. It is force-feeding them in a way that leads to negativity. What do you think?
It depends how it's taught, of course. There are some teachers who will teach it wonderfully and inspire the kids. What I always wish is that those kids could come and see us perform it perhaps even before they try and read it, because, he was written to be performed, not to be read. And in performance, and we get huge school parties, and you see them being entranced, fascinated by these extraordinary characters and situations. But now with the live from Stratford broadcast that we started doing over the last couple of years.
Plays that are beamed into cinemas on a big screen.
Yes, that are filmed in performance, but they are also streamed into schools, and that is proving a really good aid for the teachers in teaching Shakespeare.
But some people struggle, because the verse, the language, the rhythm is obviously different from the way we speak today. Yeah. But there are other issues too, and this is an international point, I suppose, because I was interested to see in your native South Africa, not so long ago, there was a move in Gauteng province to take Shakespeare off the syllabus. A panel of officials there declared that several of Shakespeare's plays were, quote, racist, sexist, and not uplifting. Othello dismissed as racist. King Lear dismissed as too far-fetched and too bleak for young minds. Do you understand that?
No, I don't. Because what Shakespeare does is present an enormous, comprehensive view of us, of mankind, of humanity, and all the things that he shows, which is so varied, about all the aspects of us. It's good for kids to be exposed to that. It's good for kids to look at all the things that Shakespeare shows us. There's no one in the world who can't benefit from having that astonishing view of humanity that Shakespeare has.
I guess it's your job as an actor, along with the director, to make it as accessible as possible.
We do. And it's one of my partner, Greg Doran's obsessions, is that clarity. And rehearsals start with us all sitting around the table and, as it were, translating every single line of Shakespeare into ordinary speech, because by the time we get to stand up and do it in front of an audience, we understand it so well that we can communicate that to an audience.
If you don't mind, let me get personal. And I feel I have a right to get personal, because you've always been so frank throughout your career. You've written memoirs, you've written diaries, and what comes across is that you are insecure. You have battled insecurity throughout your life, and at times you've dealt with that by taking cocaine, for example. I wonder why, even at the very height of your success in the mid-late 80s, early 90s, you were a very troubled person. Why was that?
Well, I think there's a whole set of things in my childhood, again, that caused that. That feeling of being an outsider is a troubling thing. And as I said earlier, you never grow out of that.
And success in acting is the insecurity about the next job and the next set of reviews so great that you can never tell yourself,
no, you never do. Well, if you do, it's because you'll stop challenging yourself. You'll stop becoming interested. The challenge, the fight, the struggle each time. And full stop again is a huge example in that I had to really believe that I could play this part. It's so at such a distance between me and him. So I was taking on a struggle, but a challenging, creative, exciting. But of course that's going to mean there are times in which you're fearful and worried and doubtful and insecure. Yes, it's part of creating anything. Any painter or musician will tell you that creativity involves the struggle. It's a good thing.
Well, it's a good thing, except, exactly, and except, you mentioned the word fear. Fear is very damaging to an actor if it reaches the point where you actually don't feel you can walk onto that stage and do it. And you did have that.
I did. I had Garen's stage fright. It's quite common that actors, not in their youth, but later on experience stage fright.
Well, what, is it literally a feeling before you step onto the stage that I won't be able to remember my lines?
Well, and it's often while you're on the stage. It's a most bizarre and awful thing because you've got different voices. You've got your voice speaking the lines. You've got another voice saying you're going to mess this up any moment. You've got another voice telling the second voice to get out of here because it's becoming impossible. And you have this kind of terrible din in your head. But I sorted it out by a sort of pill or cure method in that I did a one-man show about Primo Levi, adapted the great book This Is America in Auschwitz as a one-man show. And of course, a one-man show is, you can't have stage fright because there's nowhere to hide and no one else to help. So I touch wood, I cured it.
A final thought on actors and their insecurity. It just strikes me, and maybe your career is a fine example of this, but you can reach the very top in the theatre, and you can have won all of the awards and played the great Shakespearean roles, and yet you can still, to the biggest mass audience, find yourself not having cut through. I just wonder whether that matters. I was just struck by a headline in the Daily Mail when you won a big award, you were knighted by the Queen, and the Mail said, never can there have been a theatrical night so unknown to the public. Does that hurt?
No, because on the one hand, I had a movie career. If things had gone that way. But as it is, I've had a career with Shakespeare. The great part of my career has been with the Royal Shakespeare Company and doing those parts. I mean, how lucky can you get? I can't see that being in movies would have been luckier or more fulfilling. Yes, I would have been better known and rich. That's an incredibly stimulating career just being in Shakespeare.
You say the word just isn't really applicable there. But before we end, I want to just think wider about creativity. It seems to me that not only have you spent your life on stage, but you've also at the same time found the time to write novels, memoirs, and paint a lot. And the difference between writing a novel and painting and what you do on stage is quite profound, because painting and novel writing, you are starting with a blank sheet of paper and you are in complete control, and it is a solo effort. Very different from the theatre.
It is, and I'm stimulated by the difference. And if you get fed up being an actor, you say, oh well, I'll do some writing now, and you get fed up with that and you say, I'll do some painting. Sometimes you'll do both at the same time. I'm bringing out a book about playing Falstaff, which is a theatre journal with my drawings and illustrations. And that's very different. Then in the evening I'll go and play Falstaff, and that'll be very different and stimulating as well.
But when you were pushed by somebody to choose, I absolutely had to, and I couldn't do both. I could only have to choose painting or acting. I would choose painting. Were you really serious?
Well, increasingly so, since I'm running out of Shakespeare. And we've got a beautiful new house given the artistic director's house. And there's a great room that I use as a painting studio, and I can see myself being quite happy to spend the rest of my life in that room. That would be an all right thing to do after working. It's always not working. I feel in mind retiring to that studio and painting.
Sir Anthony Shea, thank you for being my partner.
Thank you.
The BBC World Service.
We have the headlines.
Democracy protesters spread to new parts of Hong Kong.
But we go further.
I am on a pedestrian walkway looking down into the sea of people that have taken to the streets here. People as far as the eye can see, thousands of them.
Telling it how it is.
I'm right on the border between Turkey and Syria, and within the last few minutes, two very large explosions heard just a few hundred meters from
Giving people a voice.
I saw my relatives dying in front of me.
Looking to the future.
The Liberian President, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, has appealed to all countries to help fight the Ebola virus.
It is the duty of all of us to send a message that we will not leave millions of West Africans to fend for themselves.
BBC. It is the world's radio station.
Coming up, the conversation between two powerful people. Can anything about the sexism used to sell endless new products?
We are more conscious of how we portray men. It's men who need to change their attitudes.
The old stereotype using women with not too much clothes. You thought that was the 70s. I still see it today.
Perspectives from South Africa and India with me, Kim Chakanetsa, after the news.
BBC News with Marion Marshall. The Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has said the lone gunman behind the fatal Sydney cafe siege was well known to the authorities because of his long history of violent crime, infatuation with extremism and mental instability. Abbott said that Iranian-born refugee Aman Haron Monis, who died along with two hostages after security forces stormed the cafe, sought to cloak his actions with the symbolism of Islamic State. 4 hostages and a police officer are being treated for wounds they received. Russia has raised its key interest rate to 17% from 10.5%. The country's central bank said the decision was taken to limit the risks of devaluation and inflation. In hours after Russia's currency, the ruble, suffered its worst drop since 1998, tumbling by more than 10%. Russia's main exports are oil and gas, and the fall in the price of crude oil has hit the country's economy hard. The economy has also been affected by Western sanctions. Police in the United States are hunting for a gunman suspected of killing 6 people and seriously wounding another in a series of shootings in 3 towns in Pennsylvania. The suspect has been named as 35-year-old Bradley William Stone. The authorities said the shootings appeared to be related to a domestic dispute and that all the victims, including Mr. Stone's ex-wife, had a familial relationship with him. The police said Mr. Stone was armed and dangerous and that people should stay in their homes. Spanish prosecutors are investigating the football club Real Zaragoza and a number of players in connection with the alleged fixing of a crucial end-of-season match in 2011 that saw Real Zaragoza beat Levante to escape relegation from the top division. Those suspected include Manchester United's midfielder Ander Herrera, the Atletico Madrid captain Gavi, and the coach of the Japanese national team, Javier Aguirre. BBC News.
Hello, this is The Conversation from the BBC World Service. I'm Kim Chakanetsa. Today I'm joined by Vasudha Narayanan from India and Nunu Chingila from South Africa. As with every week, the 2 women in conversation are connected by a passion. Today it's all about innovation, power and persuasion. Whether that's aimed at selling baby or marketing an entire country as a tourist destination. Advertising plays a significant role in shaping what we desire and buy, like it or not. With me from India is the award-winning Executive Creative Director, Vasudha Narayanan, who over the course of 2 decades has been involved in hundreds of campaigns and is now working for the communications agency Lowen Partners in Mumbai. And from Johannesburg, Nunu Chingila, the chair of Ogilvy and Mather advertising agency in South Africa. She also sits on the company's worldwide board representing the continent of Africa. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here.
Let me say thank you for calling me on BBC. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about the start of each of you got. We know you growing up in apartheid South Africa and Vasuda in India, where because of the spiritual omens and the alignment of the stars and planets, I was expecting
my mom and dad, I don't know if they were doing my not very big in special education. I was given cars. I don't think I lacked anything in the bottom education or in my growing up years with my parents. They expected me to graduate, to do something in my life, to support them in their old age. They expect me to be like any guy would be. They brought me up like I was a boy or a girl. There was no bias.
I think it's actually interesting because when we grew up, really, it was really in the middle of apartheid. 1963, the year that I was born, was that year of the big Rivonia trial when Mandela and all those were being sent to life imprisonment in Robben Island. So the regime at that time was getting progressively more and more worried, and the international world was beginning to look, particularly the 70s when we were growing up. Most of the global companies that were operating in South Africa were leaving. And I grew up in Soweto like anybody else in Soweto. We had begun to form a life that was quite separate. It was also very importantly in the 70s that Bantu education was introduced. Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of parents at that time felt it was important for kids to leave to get a better education outside the borders of South Africa. And that's how I ended up in Swaziland with my South and South, a refugee. A lot of South Africans were there, so it was a very open society. So for the first time we learned how to living amongst each other men.
Could you describe that first role?
At that time, the apartheid had categorized us into 4 groups, almost like the 4 shall never meet. So it was the whites, colored, Indians, and blacks. You had creative directors that are typically white, and all they wanted to know was what makes sense for black people. Would this make sense? Would this resonate with them? And if it's an idea, would this idea work for them? If I change it like this, would it work? So the reason why I think they were very interested in people of color at that time was about bringing some of the insights of that separate black living into the mainstream advertising. So what do people do over the weekend? What do people do to entertain themselves? What do they hold dear?
I heard what you said. There were different insights for the whites, the blacks, and Indians as well?
Yes, at that time you have to remember that we lived in different areas. So you could never find an area where you found Indian people, black people, and white people. So if you were white, you had absolutely no idea what Indian people did on Saturday or Sunday, or how they lived their lives during any day. Now we belong to a common class. Sometimes your income and other things determine who you are and how you live.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting, because in India the way we divide or we talk about target audiences is either on the basis of income or on the basis of education. And I was wondering if you have the blacks, the whites, the Indians and the colored, and you had to profile them on the basis of education and income. Wow, that's a lot of audiences that you have.
What happened is, with time now, audiences are classified into income, level of education, and access to a whole host of amenities. So that is fine, and I think that's regular around the world. Before, you could be very wealthy and fitted into a black community. People will treat you the same. Advertising will treat you like you're black, you're poor, you're not educated. So advertising or marketing insights did not recognize the differences inside. And Indians were, all of them were slightly wealthy and all that.
Oh, can you think of a particular campaign that you worked on during that time that stands out?
Oh, it has to be Omo being a washing powder. They had a mailbag where housewives would write and talk about their experiences of using the product, the washing powder. Now, a lot of the mailbag was in English, but some of them and it tapped into people's lifestyle, what they did over the weekend, and therefore how this particular product fitted into their lifestyle. So my first job was reading this mailbag and garnering all these insights and taking them back to the creative department. So it was my job to find those gems and go through a whole series of Omo mailbag letters.
Oh, look! Omo! Man, compare those two robes. Omo gives the brightest wash in the world.
Now, you mentioned having a performance director. Were there racial divisions within the agency?
Yes, they were there in the sense that at that time most of the studios were basically driven by white creators. They're the ones that had been to art school, like my colleague in India, and they're the ones that were schooled in the process of how to create advertising. And there were no black creators at the time. It just was non-existent.
So, Nunu, you found yourself straddling two worlds there. So for 9 to 5, you're working in the quirky world of advertising, and then you're going home to Soweto. What was it like reconciling those two things?
It was so difficult for people that I lived with to understand what I did. It was not a career that a neighbor's parents would say, oh, that's lovely, wonderful work that you're doing. So you felt alive at work because you were doing something and you thought you were enjoying that. But it was very hard to translate back that to the community that you're in, because people are like, oh, but I didn't see you in the ad, so.
Similar to what Nunu was talking about, people from my community are either engineers or doctors or lawyers. And so when I chose to join art school, there was a lot of angst in my family. I had an aunt who told me that you're stupid, that's why you're joining advertising.
Yes.
She said you're lazy and you don't want to work hard, and that's why you're joining advertising. It wasn't seen as a respectable profession. In fact, there are certain communities in India which are a little rigid in their outlook or in their thinking. Let's say if you're looking to rent a place of a community like that, it would be difficult to rent a place. It would be difficult to get married into certain households or slightly old-fashioned status. But I'm not ashamed. It is the power of communication.
So if you look back from when you began coming out of art school to now, would you say there's been any changes in how advertising, people who work in advertising are perceived?
It has become a lot better, but people still look at you narrow-mindedly. And especially if you're a woman, for example, the hours we keep in advertising. So you could finish work at, say, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then you get back to your building. Somebody will raise an objection because they'll say that it's not right for a woman to be coming back home that late.
Right.
So what sort of profession are you actually in? Are you in the right sort of company, or are you doing something else?
Nunu, was there any particularly telling moments at work when you realized that the old order is gone, that things had changed or wanted to change because of the dawn of a new South Africa?
Oh yes, I think that 1994 was so dramatic. The change was so palpable. It was in every area. He brought Nike back to South Africa. So that was a huge turning point.
Could you explain what you mean by that you brought Nike back?
What happened is, in the height of sanctions in the 70s and 80s, a lot of international companies, they physically left South Africa. I was part of the team that was put together to trade fully, not only as something that people buy on their own overseas, but to start with South Africa and saying this is how a sports brand can work. And we're identifying some of the jewels of South Africa. We'd even forgotten about our national teams because national teams were also divided in racial lines. So it was fascinating as a nation that we were discovering one nation and talking about what the brand South Africa is. It was fabulous. The whole world was very interested in South Africa. It was great to go back for me and sell what we call Mandela's country. So to say to people, these are the people beyond apartheid. This is the culture. This is what these people love. So having our first billboard right in the middle of London, it was a huge event to say we're back, we're a country, we're open for business, and we're for you.
A reminder, I'm Kim Chakaneta, this is the BBC World Service. I'm speaking with two women who've made their mark in advertising. Nunu Chingila, the chair of Ogilvy and Mather in South Africa, and Vasudha Narayanan, executive creative director of Lowen Partners in India. Now, Vasudha, you have over the last 10 years worked on hundreds of campaigns on everything from fashion to food. But your longest stint is in products company.
Yeah. The strangest thing is that baby, they and so something amazing because if you're a girl, you can't go to a car brand. You will get the insights that are required. And likewise, somebody said that if you don't have a baby, you can't work on a baby brand. And I thought that was silly. I mean, as creative people, or as human beings, you should be able to put yourself in anybody else's shoes and understand what they're going through.
I just want to come back to what you said about being put on a certain campaign because you're a woman. So are you able, is there room to push back against this?
I think there is room. Honestly, for the last few years, I've been so happy doing whatever I'm doing that I've not pushed and asked for No, can I ask you another question?
Sure.
You said you worked on Volkswagen?
Yes.
So was it difficult as a woman to work on Volkswagen?
You know, I came through the ranks of but I felt the difference once I got to management. Because once you start running an agency, all the clients are your clients. So while you are in the system and you are an employee, you can choose to work on Unilever, on fashion, on all that stuff that you love. But one day I was made MD and all these clients were mine. It was beer clients, there were car clients, and there were baby clients. And there were clients that I absolutely understood and loved and whatever. And at that time, as a woman, you suddenly realize that you now need to put your way of working onto the table. It may not be the way of working that says, I work and afterwards I go and have a drink with my client and we sit and have a good time because you know you have to get home because your daughter is waiting for you or your family is waiting for you. So I moved from the struggle between black and white to the gender struggle. How do I relate with clients that are predominantly male? And how do I now look relevant. Some of my brands where I actually don't want to know what's happening under the boot of a car. You know what I'm saying? So you start to learn to go beyond that, and I understand some brands and the principles of branding are the same, but it's hard for other people to believe that you do, to accept that.
Now, our listeners got in touch on social media with some questions for you guys. Ane Lual Deng in South Sudan got straight to the point. His question is, do you teach Let's put that into a bigger question about the perks of the job. What are the perks?
Advertising pays extremely well, and I would never have imagined that I would travel across the world. So if you're going there for a shoot or
I think that's the very you allow to work in such a broad spectrum of clients and industries, and it keeps your mind constantly learning. For me, that's the simple thing. There is not one day.
Let's stay with some comments from listeners. Norman Elvie from Mexico and Tansanga Mililo in Zimbabwe have raised concern about the business. Now, I don't want to cast any aspersions on what either of you say, but there is this argument that advertising preys on insecurity and fear.
With any profession, it has a spectrum. Advertising, of course, is about persuading people to buy certain things. It is about, as an agency, being conscious that whatever work you do will be ethical. I love advertising because I can communicate and get through people. I've seen societies move. I've seen people's lives being changed. But yes, some people, the weapon in the wrong hand can also be
I'm interested in some of the challenges you faced along the way, specifically in terms of exerting influence. Now, another criticism is the portrayal of women, and I'd like to talk about black women in particular. Now, in my experience growing up in Southern Africa, I remember that whenever I saw an advert on television and there was, a black woman, she was either lovingly stirring some soup or some stew over the stove, or she was washing up or chiming a child or staining. So those seem to be the two roles, in the kitchen or outside washing. And I'm just wondering...
And they're always a little large.
Always a little large. Exactly. I'm glad you said it. And I'm just wondering, have we moved beyond that? Or do we still have some ways to go?
I think that we have still some way to go. I think that the old stereotype of using women with not trying to I see the black woman always being portrayed in a nurturing role, despite that our constitution, there's so many powerful women, black women, whatever, I still their dignity, but I still speak from South Africa is quite big and it's very difficult. Yes, you're quite right. The responsibility is mine, but it's difficult to monitor.
Now, Vasuda, let's come to you. In India, the stories of extreme sexual violence towards women have dominated the news for some time now. I'm thinking specifically of the gang rape and murder of a student in 2012 and many
We are more conscious of how we portray men. It's men who need to change their behavior. It's men who need to change the way they behave. And so we kind of encourage men to be better. We've done a campaign for a kitchen appliance. There's this guy and a girl who go to register their marriage in the court. And you would expect that the girl is taking the hear these things. It's a form of saying that I respect it. I think that's something that we're trying to do into our acts. That live better.
Listen, you also work with children for your vision. Could you just tell us about
and it celebrates the auspiciousness of marriage. What we did was, you know what we were talking about, Nunu, earlier, where African women are seen in cliched roles like stirring a pot of soup. Likewise, in this market, in advertising, you find that everybody is talking to the bride and talking about how beautiful a bride she is. What we thought was, let's change that, let's flip it on its head a little bit. In India, remarriage or divorce is absolutely taboo. Even if you become a widow because your spouse died of natural causes, it's not to bring bad luck. Women live in a bad marriage for fear of being rejected by society. Remarriage is an emerging trend. Divorce is on the rise, very, very slowly. So we decided to reach at 100% and target our advertising. We have a commercial which is about a woman being remarried. She's sitting in front of a mirror. She's getting ready. She's being decked up by two of her friends. She's powdering her face and someone's putting on jewelry, putting on makeup. And this little girl, about a 7 or 8-year-old girl, is watching her. And you don't know what their relationship is. And she picks her up, plays with her a little bit, and then she takes her and goes to where the wedding actually is. In India, when you get married, you walk around with the sacred fire. So she takes the little girl down to the couple. She walks around the fire. She and her. And the little girl says, the husband is looking on and he says, come, join me. And he picks her up and walks around the fire.
Przeciwnik pokonany.
That's what the commercial is about. A wedding to remember. And I think it talks about how the man is accepted and about how the woman is confident and she's not shy. How she has there's one woman who wrote saying that she got remarried and she hadn't prayed. And she said that she used to have a shame because it was embarrassing to say that this was her second marriage. And she said people would look at her in not a very accepting way. So they would talk about her behind her back. When this commercial ran on air, she said, I felt proud that the society is actually looking and considering people like me. And
let's end on a listener question. Angela Blitzkow has asked, what are the qualities that make someone successful?
I don't know, maybe Christina should ask them. I don't know, there are many.
Can you list one? Of the many which
I think the biggest one is the ability to understand human behavior. If you're going to influence it, you've got to understand it.
I think that's a fantastic answer, but I would add passion. I have a theory and it's worked for me. When I was a kid, I thought about the subjects that I liked the most, and I decided that I would make my career on the basis of the subjects that I liked the most. And I loved art, and I loved English, and I loved maths. And I think advertising combined two of the subjects that I loved very much, which was art and English. And that's how I managed to stay in this industry.
We'll have to end it there. Thank you very much for your contributions today. That's the World of Advertising, with Garen, Chairman of Ogilvy and Mather in South Africa, and Vasudha Narayanan, Executive Creative Director of Low and Partners in India.
Luna, lovely meeting you, lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. The conversation will be back next week with me, Kim Chakaneta, and 2 more women from Sri Lanka. In the meantime, for facts and photos of our guests and an easy way to subscribe to our podcast, visit our webpage at bbc.co.uk/conversation.
Coming soon to the BBC World Service.
I'm Harriet Gilbert. If you want to join in next month's BBC World Book Club, we're reading Measuring the World by the German writer Helmut. We're answering questions about his novel which reimagines
This is the BBC World Service.
Tuesday's Luda McGovern is in Hong Kong and joins us now.
Our international development correspondent, Mark Doyle.
That was James Kuros here, which is our pupils in the city.
From Washington, our correspondent Tom Ethill told me more about this.
Here's Helen Briggs from our health TV.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
It's midnight GMT. I'm Jackie Leonard, and this is the newsroom from the BBC World Service. 2 hostages and a gunman are dead. Ending a 16-hour siege.
Understandably, there is a lot of speculation, but it will take time to clarify exactly what happened in Marketplace and why.
Sydney on how events unfolded and how Australians are reacting. The Russian central bank has announced a dramatic hike in its key interest rate from 10.5% to 17% after the movement the worst drop since 1998. Also in the programme, understanding how life can exist in the most extreme places on Earth.
I've been continually impressed at what life is able to accomplish, but it is fascinating stuff for sure.
And the first screening of a long-lost Sydney party. That's all here from the newsroom.
BBC News with Marion Marshall. The Australian Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, has said that the lone gunman behind the fatal Sydney cafe siege was well known to the authorities because of his long history of violent crime, infatuation with extremism and mental instability. Mr Abbott said that Iranian-born refugee